Business of Property podcast. I'm Simon, and I've been investing in property for over 20 years. And if you're an active landlord or planning your next property investment, this podcast is for you. This week, I'm reviewing the very latest property market data from PATMA, covering what's actually been happening in October 2025, and a little bit of a look ahead at what might be to come in November this year. So let's dive straight in. The first graph I normally start with looks at the number of new property listings coming onto the market each week. And it's not hard to see the trend in this one. Since mid-September, there have been fewer and fewer properties coming onto the market each week. A slowing is relatively normal at this time of year as we head toward winter, but this is still a bit sharper than we might normally expect. The overall size of the market, the number of properties currently active, is actually up according to the latest Hometrack report. Up by 7% compared to last year, in fact. That report is a few weeks old now, so it will be interesting to see if the level manages to hold over the next month. Since September, we've gone from around 35,000 new listings a week to only 25,000 in the last week of October, with general economic sentiment feeling fairly negative, along with worries about the budget at the end of November. I expect we could see further reductions in the rate of new listings before things steady out. Next up, we have average new listing prices. Generally speaking, at the moment, these are the most optimistic pricing point for a property. We only have 2 days of November data, so the final figures in this graph are from too small a sample to be relied on. So I'm just going to be looking at the October figures. Using 3 beds as my typical example, the average dropped from 344,000 in September to 337,000 in October. That's roughly a 2% drop in the average new listing price. A drop has been consistent across all property sizes in October as well. Some a little larger, some a little smaller. But if we go back and compare to a year ago, the average 3-bed new listing price was 337,700, roughly, in October 2024. So it's dropped about £700 over the year, or about 0.2%. So only a small change. If we look again at the Hometrack report, they find a national average price increase of 1.3%. Their figure is based on sold prices and agreed sale prices. So I don't think it's months out of date, like some that wait solely for sold prices to be released. So if they're correct, it would seem that despite roughly similar initial asking prices a year ago, the sale prices being achieved are up just a little. Taking a bit more of a diversion into the Hometrack report, they break down the price growth by region as well. If you're watching the video, you can see that now. If not, there will be a link to the report in the show notes. The differences across the country are quite dramatic, with the southwest seeing the only fall, although just 0.1%, along with the southeast and London, they're all basically flat. Moving up the east of the country and then across to the west, the increases seem to get gradually larger, reaching 3% in the northwest. Northern Ireland is an impressive outlier with growth of 7.6% over the year. Before I move back to looking at the latest figures from PATMA, there's one more area I want to mention from Hometrack. They note that buyer demand is down 8%, apparently due to budget uncertainty. I think there may be more to it than just that, but that is probably a heavy part. Along with agreed sales being 3% down. They report the usual pre-Christmas slowdown beginning 6 to 8 weeks earlier than normal. I don't know about you, but a shift of 1.5 to 2 months sounds like an awful lot to me. I think that's quite a dramatic change that they're suggesting is happening this year compared to last year. While I've reported before that things seem to be slowing down a bit earlier this year, I wasn't quite as pessimistic as that, I don't think. Another interesting comment they include is that we are, of course, comparing this year with 2024, being last year. And at the end of 2024, it was sort of slightly distorted, with buyers trying to rush completions before stamp duty increases kicked in. Now, I'm not sure how much of that happened at the end of 2024 and how much of it happened at the beginning of 2025, but yeah, maybe that did impact things enough to sort of make our comparisons less reliable than they might normally be. Getting back to our regular program of PAP stats though, and moving on to the number of properties sold each week. Despite all the pessimism and reduced properties coming onto the market, the rate of sales seems to be holding up surprisingly well. Only in the last 3 weeks does there seem to be a slight slowing trend to be seen, and even that is pretty small. Looking at the rate of reductions, this has come down a little in October, with only 20% of listings seeing a price reduction, compared with 21% in September, although that's still up from 18% in October last year. Moving on to looking at how long listings take to sell, October has managed to hold completely flat at 74 days. Looking back at last year, October 2024, had an average listing time of 65 days before a property was marked as sold. So things are definitely running a bit slower this year. If we look at seasonal trends, we can expect things to slow down quite a bit more between now and January. Will average sale times manage to reach the average from winter a couple of years ago at nearly 3 months? Maybe there's a surprise waiting for us in the budget that will manage to lift the property market a bit. Or perhaps it would be better just to hold it fairly steady and not expect anything or not hope for anything that will come along and upset things too much. While things are not amazing at the moment, they're not at least too bad. If you want a one-line summary of the current sales market, I think it's a buyer's market. I'd never recommend trying to time the market. The investment numbers need to stack up regardless of when you might think the market will be changing one way or the other. But a strong buyer with funds should be able to find some good options at the moment. As always, I'm just going to finish up with a very quick look at rental asking prices. If you're watching the video, the end of this graph is again only based on 2 days of data, so should be ignored really. Looking at October though, which has got a whole month's worth of data, asking rents are down for 1-bed, 2-bed and 3-bed properties, but up just a little for 4 and more beds. That's comparing September with October. Looking more closely at the 3-bed average specifically, it's gone from £1,651 a month of asking rent to £1,625 of asking rent. Roughly a 1.6% fall. A fall in average asking rents is normal at this time of year though, so this isn't, I don't think, anything to be too worried about. If we go back to looking at the asking rent for last October, specifically the 3-bed average, that was £1,588. So the change to this year is an increase of 2.3%, which is tracking a bit behind inflation, but it's not too bad at all, especially since rents have had a few years of inflation busting increases. So with that just about positive stat to end up, I wish you well in any bargain hunting you may have planned in the next few months, whether that be for property or anything else. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to speaking to you again next time.